Let me look these two companies, company X and company Y. They decided to start a housing project which is called H, and there is no third party or third company that is created from X and Y. The housing project is called a joint arrangement. This is a joint arrangement. H is a joint arrangement that is built in the form of activity. Also, if X and Y creates, if two companies create a new company, let me name this new company N, that helps them, this third company is called a joint arrangement that is built in the form of business, and this N is also a joint arrangement that's created between these two companies, and it's not created in the form of activity like the previous one, but it is in the form of company or in the form of business, in the form of organization. So joint arrangement can be classified into two, uh, depending on the rights to use and the obligation to pay. These are a joint operation and a joint venture. Joint arrangement is divided into joint operation and joint venture. We look deep, so don't worry about it. So the first one is joint operation. Joint operation is if the parties has a full right to use the assets or of the arrangement. For example, in the previous case, if X and Y has a full right to use N and a full obligation to pay the arrangement's liability. If X and Y has an obligation, a full obligation, or an obligation to pay fully the liability of N, or all the arrangements asset and liability is a venture's assets and liability. All the N's assets and the N's liability is the X and Y's asset and the X and Y's liability. Liability and it includes all joint activities and some joint business. So in this case, we can say that it is a joint operation, and it might include it if it is an activity like a housing project. By default, is an operation, a joint operation. But if it is a company, it might be joint operation or it might be joint venture. We have seen that there is a two classification of joint arrangement, which is joint operation and joint venture. If the joint arrangement is like a housing project, if it is an activity, by default it's a joint operation. We have completed. But if it is formed in the form of company or in the form of organization, it might be a joint operation. It might also be a joint venture. So there should be additional criteria to identify it as a joint activity or as a joint venture or as a joint operation. So if the parties or the venturers, this X and Y are called venturers. If the venturer has a partial rights, means if the arrangement is this N, buys a machine, some with the venturer's money and some with a liability. So if N buys a machine, and that if that machine is bought from the money that's brought from these two companies or from the venturers, and the rest is bought from with a liability, some with the venturers money and some with liability, and if the venturers want back their contribution, and the machine will be sold and their money will be given to them, so that they do not have a right on the whole asset, unlike the joint operation. What it means is